There's a trap most people fall into without even knowing it, and it happens in a fraction of a second. Someone questions you, challenges your intentions, attacks your character, and before you even think, your mouth opens to defend. "I didn't mean it like that. You've got it wrong. Let me explain." It feels natural, even righteous. But to Machiavelli, that instant is where you surrender everything. Because the moment you justify yourself, you've already admitted you're vulnerable enough to need justification. And in the arena of power, perception isn't just everything, it's the only thing. When they watch you flinch, they don't see innocence, they see weakness bleeding out. This is the iron law Machiavelli decoded centuries before the rest caught on. The man who defends himself diminishes himself. The man who refuses forces reality itself to defend him instead. Let's destroy an illusion right now. Defending yourself almost never convinces anyone of anything. What it actually does is hemorrhage power from your position. Because when you start explaining, justifying, clarifying, you're operating in their framework. You're playing by their rules. You're silently declaring, "You have the right to judge me." And once they hand them that authority, the narrative belongs to them. Even when you're objectively right, you appear guilty. Because only the uncertain rush to prove themselves. The powerful, they let the accusation hang in dead air. They allow it to float, untouched, unaddressed, because they understand the real strategy. Turn the mirror back on the accuser, make them question their own sanity, make them appear emotional, obsessed, unhinged, because whoever speaks first usually surrenders the frame. And Machiavelli knew, whoever owns the frame owns the outcome. Most people defend themselves because they crave understanding. They believe if they just explain thoroughly enough, articulate precisely enough, repeat convincingly enough, vindication will arrive. But that belief stems from emotional fragility, not tactical thinking. You don't want understanding, you want dominance. Understanding is for therapy sessions. Dominance is for power dynamics. And power never flows from being understood. It flows from being feared, respected, and unreachable. So when someone labels you arrogant, cold, calculating, ruthless, and you instantly respond with, "No, you don't get it. What I meant was," you've already collapsed. Because now you're reacting. Now you're proving their words landed. Now you've surrendered control. And when that happens, you forfeit the most Machiavellian asset you possess: mystery. Consider the most powerful figures you've ever encountered, not the loudest, not the most beloved, the ones who wielded silence like a blade, the ones who made you doubt yourself with nothing but a stare, the ones who, when attacked, never even blinked. Machiavelli would tell you this eternal truth: he who explains submits. He who remains silent forces others to fill the void, and they always overestimate him. That's the game. When you refuse to react, discomfort floods their nervous system. They begin doubting their own accusations. They search desperately for validation and discover none. Suddenly, their power contracts while yours expands exponentially. Why? Because you've done the one thing emotional people cannot tolerate. You made them argue with themselves. And that's how you flip the entire power dynamic. You allow their accusation to die, choking on its own emptiness. Let's go surgical. You enter a room. Someone fires a shot, subtle or direct, maybe undermining your success, mocking your demeanor, questioning your past. Every eye turns, waiting for your response. Here's your move. Say absolutely nothing. No defense, no counterattack, no smirk, just absolute crystalline stillness. In that suspended moment, you become untouchable, because everyone present is now forced to wonder, why didn't he react? Does he know something we're missing? Is he operating on a different level entirely? Did that attack just make him more dangerous? You've just inverted the entire social architecture, because people aren't analyzing the accusation anymore. They're studying your response. And silence, when delivered with complete presence, communicates more authority than any explanation could ever dream of achieving. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. He didn't just study political mechanics, he dissected human psychology. And he grasped one principle better than anyone before or since. Power isn't what you say, it's what people believe you could say, but deliberately choose not to. Now here's the coldest tactical move of all. Sometimes you don't merely ignore the accusation, you invert it. Someone calls you manipulative? Smile slightly, look past them into the middle distance and say, if that's your interpretation. Not defensive, not apologetic, just cool, detached neutrality. What happens? They scramble internally because they were anticipating a battle. They were expecting to watch you squirm and justify. Instead, they're left holding their own weapon, alone. That's when guilt begins infecting their psychology. They start wondering if they overreached, if they embarrassed themselves publicly, if they now appear insecure and petty. And guess what? They do. You've just taken the psychological energy they launched at you and forced them to carry its full weight without lifting a single finger. There's a precise moment when silence becomes unbearable. Not for you, for the person who expected your reaction. That's when the power dynamic inverts completely. They entered thinking they were the prosecutor. Now they're exposed as someone desperate for attention, for validation, for your emotional response. And you've just transformed into something far more powerful than innocent. You've become untouchable. Machiavelli understood something most people will die never grasping. Words exist not to clarify truth, but to obscure it. And when someone attacks you, subtly or openly, they want you to fight through that fog. They want to drown you in emotional explanation, because the more you explain, the less certainty you project. So instead, let them fill the silence themselves. And what inevitably happens? They overextend, they repeat themselves, they escalate their tone, they begin appearing desperate, emotional, unstable. You've said nothing, yet now they're the one facing judgment, because the crowd isn't processing the content of what's being said. They're observing who maintains composure and who's visibly rattled. That's social power in its purest form, and it doesn't emerge from being right. It emerges from being unreachable. Picture this. You're in a business meeting. Someone subtly undermines your position. I'm not convinced that strategy's really thought through. Or, he always has these bold ideas. They're hunting for a reaction. They want you to bite. What do most people do? They lean forward aggressively. They explain. They prove. They clarify. They betray nervousness. The room detects it instantly. But the Machiavellian operator, he leans back. He waits. Maybe he smirks faintly. And if he speaks at all, it's not a defense, it's a redirect. Let's hear your strategy then. Now the attacker must perform, and the room's focus flips entirely. Suddenly, they're being evaluated. They're under scrutiny. Because silence from the confident functions as accusation without words. It makes people feel small without you doing anything active. In romantic or personal relationships, this becomes even more devastating. Say your partner accuses you. You don't care about me anymore. The average person panics. They launch into explanations, reassurances, defenses, and in doing so, they validate the entire emotional framework. But the Machiavellian approach operates differently. You don't dismiss them. You don't argue. You allow the weight of their accusation to hang in the space between you. You watch them feel their own drama echo back at them. Then, with complete calm, you respond, "That's not how I see it." Short, grounded, no explanation, no justification. Now they feel uncertain. They question their own emotional tone. They wonder if they overreacted, because in that moment, you controlled what matters most, the emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. There's an even colder tactic, and it's absolutely surgical. Don't just remain calm when accused. Disappear. Someone insults you? Don't reply, don't respond. Don't acknowledge, but don't block them either. Let your absence sit like a mirror they're forced to stare into. Let them marinate in the silence of being completely ignored. This destroys people in two ways. First, they realize you didn't even consider them worthy of acknowledgement. Second, they start spinning internal narratives, and most of the time it demolishes their composure entirely. Why? Because the average person survives on emotional validation. Even in conflict, they need the feedback loop. If you remove that, they wither, they spiral, they post more. They talk to mutual connections. They try desperately to bait another reply, and with every new attempt, they appear weaker, more obsessed, more unhinged, all while you remain perfectly, powerfully still. And that's when you win. Not because you proved anything, but because they destroyed themselves trying to extract a reaction from you. Here's where it gets elite level. Instead of defending yourself when attacked, make their accusation look like a symptom of their weakness. Someone calls you arrogant? Interesting how confidence makes certain people so uncomfortable. Someone says you're manipulative? Only people who refuse to be influenced say that. Someone calls you fake? People always say that when they stop getting what they want. You don't just deny the accusation, you reframe it as their insecurity. And now they're the ones scrambling to defend themselves. It's not just reversal, it's power judo. You use their own emotional force and flipped them into their own public collapse. Machiavelli would call this the turn of the blade. Do not meet the sword with a shield. Let the attacker fall on his own weapon. The world conditions you to defend your reputation, to explain yourself, to clear your name. But Machiavelli saw the trap clearly. He knew that the instant you chase innocence, you admit guilt. So the true strategist never plays that game. Instead, he appears too composed to be shaken, too elevated to care, too certain of his position to explain it. And gradually, those attempting to tear him down begin appearing unstable, reactive, jealous, weak, because the more you defend, the more it appears you need to. But the more you ignore, the more dangerous they assume you are. And that assumption is where power is born. Most people believe power means proving yourself, proving you're right, proving you're not what they claim, proving you're superior to their perception. But Machiavelli would laugh at this, because the second you try to prove anything, you've already validated the other person's authority to judge you. And when you hand someone that validation, you hand them your leash. Imagine you're in a group setting, social gathering, dinner table, conference room. Someone launches a public jab. You always act like you know everything. Or, he's always like this. I guess humility isn't your thing. What do most people do? They tense visibly. They try laughing it off. Or worse, they respond with an explanation, attempting to smooth things over, and they think they're saving face. But what they're actually doing is confirming that a hit landed. Now everyone's watching the defense, and that alone makes the original jab appear valid. Now, what the Machiavellian does instead: pause, hold silence for exactly 2 seconds, scan the room, not with aggression, but with quiet amusement. Then, only if absolutely necessary, offer something calm, precise, and dismissive. "You seem emotional today," or "interesting take," or nothing at all, just a long, steady gaze. What happens next is completely predictable. The attacker shifts uncomfortably. They fidget. They search for backup. They try explaining their joke. They feel the heat of the room shifting onto them, because your lack of reaction just communicated something louder than words ever could. You're not the one under judgment. They are. In the digital arena, things escalate exponentially faster. Comments, posts, call-outs, direct messages, people constantly trying to bait you into reacting. Here's the truth Machiavelli would burn into your consciousness. In the court of public opinion, silence signals guilt, unless your silence commands fear. So here's the tactic. When you're attacked online, don't defend, don't explain, distort. You don't address the specific claim. You redirect the energy back into the crowd. Example: someone says you're toxic or manipulative. Instead of posting a tearful defense or lengthy clarification, you post, "People always call you dangerous when they can't control you." What just happened? You didn't defend yourself. You reframed the accusation into a badge of power. Now they look bitter. You look unfazed, and the audience begins questioning who's actually in control. That's not damage control. That's narrative dominance. Let's get even more surgical. There are 3 tools you can deploy instead of defending yourself. 1. Silence, the default. Cold, powerful, leaves them exposed. 2. Deflection. Reframe the narrative without acknowledging the jab.
3. Precision cuts. Short, sharp truths that end the game immediately. Examples: someone says, "You're full of yourself." You respond, "Confidence upsets the insecure." They say, "You're fake." You respond, "I don't owe you authenticity." They say, "You think you're better than everyone." You respond, "No, I just don't think like everyone." These aren't defenses, they're status assertions. They don't say, "I'm not guilty." They say, "You can't touch me." And that's the core principle. The Machiavellian never begs to be seen as good. He dares people to see him as bad and walks taller for it. When you refuse to defend yourself, something fascinating happens to your enemies. They become unhinged because they expected a battle, and instead, they're swinging at smoke. They start escalating. They push harder. They get more dramatic. They expose more of their insecurity. And the more they do, the more you rise in the perception of observers. Why? Because you've made them perform their own collapse. And that's the Machiavellian endgame. You don't destroy your enemies. You let their obsession with you destroy them. You think being misunderstood is dangerous, but being predictable is infinitely worse. The misunderstood man has mystery. The predictable man is easy to manipulate. People who constantly try to clear things up are seen as desperate. People who remain calmly misunderstood, they are feared. Machiavelli knew this viscerally. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But even more critically, it's better to be confusing than predictable. Because the confused man is cautious. He watches you carefully. He doesn't act rashly. And that means you control the battlefield. Let's obliterate the final illusion. You don't need a good reputation to win. You need a strong one. The man with a good reputation is expected to be clean, soft, agreeable. The man with a strong reputation, he's not always liked, he's not always trusted, but no one dares move against him casually. That's what happens when you never defend yourself. Your reputation becomes not about what people believe, but about what they fear you'll do next. That's how you flip the power dynamic permanently. You stop fighting for approval. Instead, you create an aura that makes people cautious, because even your silence feels like a calculated decision, and every move you don't make becomes a move in their mind. The final evolution isn't silence, it's aura. A presence so composed, so secure, so far above the petty noise that accusations simply evaporate before they land. And this doesn't come from being emotionless. It comes from being unbothered by design. Because once you've trained yourself not to defend, not to explain, not to seek validation, you cross a threshold where your existence becomes the defense. And that's when power becomes effortless. Think about the rare few people in life who never explain themselves. They don't post long rants, they don't correct the record, they don't argue with critics. And yet, people respect them more. Why? Because silence in the face of accusation creates myth. It invites interpretation. And the human mind, when left without explanation, fills the void with strength. People assume you must be dangerous. You must know something they don't. You must be so secure in your identity that you don't even blink when challenged. And that assumption, that's what makes people follow you. Machiavelli didn't care about being good. He cared about being in control. And the one who never defends is always in control of perception, even when surrounded by lies. Here's the paradox. The more you explain yourself, the more alone you appear, because no one feels compelled to step in when you're already arguing your own case. But if you remain calm, if you stand silent, unfazed, people start feeling the urge to defend you. They say, "That was uncalled for. He didn't deserve that. Why are you coming after him? He didn't even respond and you're still pushing." Suddenly, they become your shield. And what's better than defending yourself? Letting others do it for you without asking. That's Machiavellian leverage. Let the crowd argue your case while you remain above the noise. Now, you're not just respected, you're elevated.
It doesn't happen overnight. You build it like a fortress, stone by stone, by acting with restraint, by choosing stillness over reaction, by never explaining more than absolutely necessary. Start here. Never correct insults clearly meant to provoke. Let them speak. Let them echo. Your silence tells the room that the insult didn't even register on your radar. Respond to indirect shots with calm confusion, not offense. Is that how you see it? Said with total serenity. It dismantles the emotional energy behind their attack. Use short closing phrases instead of defenses. Noted? Okay. Think what you like. Time will tell. Each one closes the door. It doesn't invite further debate. It ends the scene. Study how you hold your face, your body, your gaze. The Machiavellian never twitches, flinches, or tenses. Stillness is his armor. And the more still you remain when others lose control, the more your power expands silently. When people don't know how to provoke you, they fear you, because you become unpredictable, not erratic, but unreadable, a mirror that reflects their own instability back at them. Machiavelli would say, the most dangerous man is not the one who attacks first.
It is the one who never needs to. You will reach a point where the attacks stop, not because you fought them, but because people know they'll lose before they start. Your presence says, I don't play defense. I let others destroy themselves while trying to reach me. There is a difference between strength and immunity. Strength still flinches, still reacts, still gets emotional, even if it fights back. Immunity doesn't even acknowledge the hit. That's the Machiavellian ideal. You don't win the argument. You end the argument before it starts, by never needing to answer it. Because when you no longer defend yourself, people stop seeing you as someone who needs to be put on trial. You're not on their level. You've moved beyond the court of public approval, and the only judgment that matters is your own. From this point forward, you don't live in defense. You live in definition. You define your image. You define your tone. You define your silence. And people feel that. They feel the certainty behind your eyes, the calmness in your posture, the danger in your quiet. You're not resisting anymore. You're commanding. And that's when the room shifts. The crowd speaks less. Your enemies grow quieter. Your name carries weight, not because you fought for it, but because you never explained it. Never defending yourself doesn't mean never speaking. It means speaking only when it shifts the power. When you say something, it should feel like a move, not a response. Because every time you don't explain yourself, every time you hold still while the world spins, you become the one thing they can't control, a man who answers to no one.